In an age where ambition never sleeps and comparison hunts us every waking hour, one question haunts even the strongest minds: how much is enough? Today, we strip away illusions, expose the traps of desire, and uncover the cold, strategic answer Niccolo Machiavelli would give to achieve power, stability, and real freedom. Most people feel stuck because they chase goals that were never theirs, fall into endless wanting, and mistake excess for success. This video solves the root problem: how to recognize the precise point where ambition stops creating power and starts destroying it. Machiavelli knew this. His formula is blunt, unsettling, and liberating. Listen closely, because this is the part most people refuse to hear. They chase money the way frightened soldiers chase the safety of a city wall, never realizing the wall can collapse on them just as easily. Machiavelli never worshipped possessions. He worshipped leverage. He studied the way men traded influence, defended authority, and protected themselves from becoming dependent on the very luxuries they claimed to enjoy. His warning is razor-sharp. A person who measures life by possessions will always feel empty, because possessions demand to be fed. Influence, on the other hand, feeds you. Imagine a ruler who owns vast land, gold, servants, treasures. Impressive from a distance. Yet inside the palace walls, he is fragile. His wealth requires armies to guard it, advisors to manage it, alliances to preserve it. Every jewel becomes a liability. Every piece of property becomes a chain. In Machiavelli's eyes, this ruler is not powerful. He is burdened. The appearance of abundance masks a deep vulnerability. He has confused ownership with control, and that mistake has cost him his freedom. Now picture another ruler, one whose possessions are modest but whose influence is undeniable. He speaks and people listen. He decides and people move. His wealth is not measured in coins but in autonomy. Machiavelli would point to this man and say, "Here lies real strength. Here lies a man who understands the true value of enough." For him, enough is not an amount. It is a condition, a strategic threshold where resources elevate his authority instead of chaining him to endless obligation. Machiavelli believed that a wise person inventories their power the same way a general studies the battlefield, coldly, honestly, without emotional attachment. He would ask you, what possessions do you hold that fortify your freedom, and what possessions secretly weaken your will? Most people collect symbols of success instead of building structures of power. They buy homes they cannot defend, lifestyles they cannot maintain, and desires they cannot resist. They sink deeper into dependency disguised as prosperity. This is why he insisted that the wise ruler takes stock not of what he owns, but of what he can withstand losing. Power, in Machiavellian terms, is the ability to move through the world without desperation. It is the capacity to choose your next step without begging permission from circumstance. When you measure yourself by possessions, you hand your security to things outside your control. When you measure yourself by power, you reclaim control from the world and place it back in your own grasp. The modern mind constantly confuses abundance with advantage. You see individuals flaunting what they own, unaware that every additional possession increases the number of threats they must guard against. This is why Machiavelli would tell you that enough is reached long before the average person realizes it. Enough is the moment your resources strengthen your strategic position. Enough is when you can refuse manipulation without fear. Enough is when wealth serves your purpose instead of consuming your courage. If you want true freedom, you must learn to measure your life the way Machiavelli measured kingdoms. Study what gives you leverage, not what decorates your image. Study what protects your autonomy, not what fills your closet. Study what shapes your future, not what distracts your present. The person who understands this begins to rise above the noise of the world, because they stop chasing the illusions that keep others exhausted, broke, and endlessly controlled. Machiavelli studied rulers the way a surgeon studies the human body. He saw desire as the organ most likely to rot a person from the inside. Not because desire is evil, but because uncontrolled desire exposes a weakness sharper than any blade an enemy could draw. He understood that the moment a ruler wants something too intensely, that ruler becomes predictable. He becomes transparent. He becomes easy to steer, easy to trap, easy to bend. This is why Machiavelli wrote that the man who governs his desires governs his fate, while the man who serves his desires becomes a puppet to forces he cannot see. Imagine a prince who craves luxury, praise, admiration. Every courtier who wishes to manipulate him knows exactly how to pull his strings. Offer him a gift, flatter him, promise him recognition, and he will move in whatever direction you choose. His throne might be made of gold, though his mind is made of clay. Machiavelli never feared the ambitious. He feared the unrestrained. He knew that excess desire tears down even the strongest walls. When a ruler wants too much, he overstretches. When he overstretches, he makes reckless alliances. When he makes reckless alliances, he eventually falls into a trap built not by enemies but by his own hunger. Now picture a different ruler, one who desires little that he cannot provide for himself. Court manipulators approach him with promises, yet he remains unmoved. Merchants offer luxuries, yet he feels no urgency to possess them. Flatterers attempt to seduce his ego, yet he does not cling to their praise. This ruler is dangerous. His restraint is a weapon. He cannot be bribed, lured, or baited. Machiavelli would look at him with approval, because he embodies the principle that the man who wants less becomes the man no one can easily command. Desire, in Machiavellian logic, is the true battlefield. It is not land or gold or politics. It is the inner arena where strength or weakness is decided. You can fortify a castle, train an army, gather advisors, and still lose everything if your desires remain wild and ungoverned. Machiavelli watched rulers betray allies, burn nations, and sabotage their own legacies simply because they had no discipline over what they craved. A single unexamined desire has power to steer a lifetime off course. The modern world has only amplified this danger. You are surrounded by influences that profit when you want more than you need. They feed your impulses, inflate your cravings, and convince you that satisfaction is always one purchase or one achievement away. Machiavelli would warn you that this is the fastest path to enslavement. A person whose desires are constantly expanding becomes a person constantly controlled. The moment you chase what someone else has convinced you to want, you hand them the keys to your mental kingdom. To control desire is not to suppress ambition, it is to refine it. Machiavelli valued ambition that served a purpose, not ambition that served the ego. He pushed rulers to understand the difference between a strategic want and a destructive longing. A strategic want strengthens position, builds autonomy, and advances destiny. A destructive longing drains resources, exposes vulnerability, and opens the door to manipulation. When you understand this, you begin to see why Machiavelli's teachings feel cold at first, yet carry a warmth of liberation for anyone strong enough to absorb them. A person who controls desire becomes unpredictable in the best way. They choose their moves from a place of clarity rather than compulsion. They are no longer pulled by temptation, no longer shaken by scarcity thinking, no longer seduced by the illusion that more always means better. Machiavelli believed this state of mind was the closest a person could get to true inner sovereignty. Your desires reveal your weaknesses, master them and you reveal your strength. Machiavelli observed one truth that leaders ignore until it destroys them. Freedom is never stolen in a single blow. It is surrendered piece by piece through dependency. Every time a ruler relied on another man for protection, for wealth, for approval, for comfort, he carved away a sliver of his autonomy. By the time he realized how much he depended on others, he was already trapped in their shadows. Machiavelli believed that the strongest ruler is the one who minimizes how many people he must rely on to survive, to think, to move, to lead. Picture a prince who cannot make decisions without the counsel of his advisors. On the surface, he appears wise, thoughtful, surrounded by experts. Yet in private, he is paralyzed. He fears displeasing them. He fears losing their favor. He fears acting alone. His dependence on their approval becomes a leash around his authority. Machiavelli would study this man and see weakness disguised as humility. He would say that a ruler who cannot act without reassurance is already serving those he thinks he commands. Now imagine a prince who keeps advisors not because he needs their permission, but because he values their perspective. He listens, but he is not owned by their guidance. He consults, but he does not cling. If they leave, betray him, or attempt to sway him, his direction remains clear. This ruler is dangerous in the best way. His independence makes him unpredictable. No one can drag him by invisible strings because he has built a mind and a life that does not collapse when a single support is removed. Machiavelli understood that dependency is the quiet thief of sovereignty. He saw rulers destroyed not by armies, but by their inability to function without the comfort of something external. One prince cannot sleep without his riches, another cannot speak without flattery, another cannot rule without alliances that bind him more tightly than chains. These are not rulers, they are prisoners in fine clothes. Their dependencies define them more harshly than their crowns. Modern life is no different. You are surrounded by dependencies disguised as conveniences. People depend on validation from strangers, depend on possessions for identity, depend on routines they never chose, depend on relationships that weaken them more than they strengthen them. Machiavelli would tell you that each dependency is a subtle surrender. The more you depend on, the less control you possess. The less control you possess, the more easily you are steered by forces that do not care about your freedom. Autonomy, in Machiavelli's world, is not solitude. It is self-command. It is the capacity to move forward without waiting for permission. It is the ability to detach from influences that weaken judgment. It is the discipline to build a life in which losing a single piece does not collapse the entire structure. He believed that a ruler who needs less becomes a ruler who fears less. Fear is born from dependence. Independence kills fear at the root. He would urge you to examine every dependency in your own life with brutal honesty. What do you rely on that strips your strength rather than reinforces it? Who do you depend on out of habit instead of necessity? What comforts have quietly become cages? True freedom begins with cutting these threads one by one, replacing them with skills, with discipline, with clarity, with internal stability. Machiavelli favored rulers who were self-contained storms. Their stability came from within, not from alliances held together by fear or favors. A person who reduces dependency becomes powerful in a way that cannot be faked. They are harder to manipulate because nothing can be easily taken from them. They are harder to intimidate because their survival does not hang on the approval of others. They are harder to control because their choices come from strength, not desperation. Machiavelli believed that this form of autonomy separates those who simply appear free from those who truly are. Machiavelli believed that time is the only resource a ruler can never reclaim, never defend once wasted, never negotiate back into existence. He watched powerful men lose kingdoms, not through betrayal or invasion, but through the slow erosion of their hours. He understood that the enemy who consumes your time does not need to raise a sword. They only need to distract you, delay you, or convince you that urgency belongs to their priorities rather than your purpose. This is why Machiavelli treated time with a level of seriousness that bordered on severity. He knew that a ruler who cannot govern his hours cannot hope to govern anything else. Imagine a prince who fills his days with ceremonies, social gatherings, and empty conversations. His schedule looks full, yet his life remains hollow. He tends to the desires of others while his own ambitions rot in the background. Advisors keep him busy with trivial matters. Courtiers flood him with demands that pose as necessity, but serve only to drain his focus. Machiavelli would see this prince as a man under siege, not by armies but by distractions. His kingdom appears orderly while his mind is slowly falling apart. This ruler is not busy. He is held hostage. Now imagine another prince. He treats his time like a guarded fortress. He does not grant access easily. He does not respond to every request, every demand, every fabricated emergency. His schedule reflects intention rather than obligation. Those who wish to consume his time must cross walls of clarity, purpose, and discipline. He is not rude or distant, but he is unmoved by pressure. Machiavelli would respect this ruler because he understands that protecting time is identical to protecting power. Without control of the day, control of the destiny evaporates instantly. Machiavelli knew that people attack your time in ways they would never dare attack your authority. They ask for meetings, favors, opinions, attention, reassurance, involvement. Each request seems small, each interruption feels harmless, yet collectively they drain the strength required to build, to strategize, to lead. A ruler weakened by constant distraction becomes easy to manipulate. The mind grows reactive instead of strategic. The vision becomes clouded. He begins to operate in survival rather than intention. Machiavelli considered this one of the most silent and effective methods of dethroning a powerful mind. Modern life intensifies this danger. Notifications, messages, expectations, entertainment, comparison, and endless noise compete for your hours. You are not being attacked physically. You are being attacked mentally. Your time is being carved apart by forces that rely on your distraction to survive. Machiavelli would observe this world with cold clarity. He would say that a person who cannot detach from noise will never rise above it. The world profits when you are busy. You profit when you are focused. He believed that the strongest individuals cultivate a level of time discipline that feels almost aggressive to those who lack it, not because they desire isolation, but because they desire elevation. They know that every wasted hour delays a stronger future. They know that every pointless conversation drains the energy needed for meaningful action. They know that every commitment made without intention becomes a chain tied to someone else's agenda. A person who guards their time becomes powerful in ways others cannot understand. Their thoughts sharpen, their decisions improve, their opportunities multiply because they have space to see them. Their confidence grows because they live by design instead of by reaction. Machiavelli would call this the foundation of freedom. The individual who protects their time protects their throne, even if that throne exists only in the discipline of their daily life. Machiavelli watched rulers rise with dazzling force, only to collapse with the same speed that made their ascent impressive. He understood a truth that still blinds ambitious people today. Spectacle attracts attention, but stability preserves power. The ruler who lives for dramatic victories becomes addicted to applause. He begins to chase moments that make him look powerful rather than decisions that make him remain powerful. Machiavelli did not admire the rulers who shined the brightest. He admired the ones who lasted the longest. Imagine a prince who builds his reputation on grand gestures, expensive feasts, lavish displays of wealth, sudden policies meant to shock the public into admiration. The crowd cheers, the rivals tremble, his name spreads like wildfire. Yet inside his court, advisors whisper, soldiers sense weakness behind the glamour, enemies recognize he is fueled by ego, not structure. Machiavelli would watch this prince with cold eyes. He would say that the louder the performance, the more fragile the throne. A man who relies on spectacle must constantly deliver more of it, and each new display empties his resources, his patience, and his strategic mind. He becomes a performer rather than a ruler. Now picture another prince, quiet, calculated, patient. He appears modest in public, almost unremarkable compared to those who crave attention. Yet behind closed doors, he strengthens alliances, fortifies defenses, builds loyalty through consistency instead of theatrics. His kingdom does not shake when storms come because its foundation is built on discipline rather than excitement. Machiavelli favored this ruler. He knew that stability does not impress crowds, but it conquers chaos. Power built slowly is power that cannot be easily taken. Machiavelli understood that people often confuse momentum with mastery. A ruler may rise quickly thanks to spectacle, but he's always one mistake away from collapse. The court that applauds him today will desert him tomorrow because their loyalty is tied to entertainment, not respect. Spectacle demands constant feeding. Stability demands constant strengthening. One drains a ruler, the other protects him. This truth applies fiercely to modern life. People chase viral success, instant recognition, sudden leaps in status. They want the world to notice them before they understand themselves. They build reputations they cannot maintain, habits they cannot support, expectations they cannot survive. Machiavelli would look at this behavior and warn that the craving to be noticed is the fastest path to being destroyed. Stability is the real currency of power. The individual who cultivates it becomes unshakable. He would urge you to examine your own ambitions with ruthless clarity. Do you want to look successful, or do you want to remain strong for years? Do you want applause or authority? Do you want rapid elevation or firm ground beneath your feet? Spectacle pulls you upward fast, but gravity punishes every careless ascent. Stability raises you slowly, yet each step becomes a foundation rather than a risk. Machiavelli believed that stability reveals a level of wisdom that spectacle cannot imitate. A stable ruler thinks beyond the moment. He invests in the structures no one sees. He prepares for crises before they arrive. He avoids unnecessary battles because he knows his true strength is endurance, not flash. Spectacle burns brightly. Stability burns permanently. A person who chooses stability becomes far harder to defeat. Their life is not built on reactions. Their success is not dependent on attention. Their confidence does not collapse when circumstances shift. Machiavelli would say that stability is the closest thing to invincibility a human can create, because it removes the frantic need to impress and replaces it with the quiet force of lasting control. Machiavelli studied ambition with the precision of a strategist who understood that desire for greatness can build a kingdom or burn it to ash. He believed ambition is essential, but he also believed ambition without limits is poison disguised as fuel. A ruler who never defines his ceiling becomes a ruler who never knows when to stop advancing. That ruler eventually crosses boundaries he should have protected, provokes enemies he should have ignored, and exhausts allies he should have preserved. Machiavelli saw this pattern unfold again and again. Ambition lifts the unwise faster than their character can support, and the fall becomes inevitable. Imagine a prince who achieves a victory. Instead of consolidating power, he immediately chases another. Instead of strengthening what he has gained, he lunges for more. His appetite grows with every triumph. His judgment becomes clouded by the thrill of momentum. He begins to believe he is unstoppable, that fortune itself bends to his will. Machiavelli would observe this prince with a combination of fascination and regret. He knows where this story leads. The prince will overextend. He will face threats from directions he never bothered to guard. He will trust his ambition more than logic, and logic always wins in the end. This prince is celebrated by the crowd, yet he is silently marching toward his own undoing. Now imagine a different prince, one who studies his ambition rather than being driven by it. He knows precisely what he seeks, why he seeks it, and how far he is willing to go. He has a defined point where he will stop, consolidate, and strengthen. He is not intimidated by the idea of limits, because he understands they exist to preserve his position, not restrict his potential. Machiavelli admired this ruler. This prince is strategic, not impulsive. He advances when conditions align, not when ego demands. His ambition has a ceiling, and that ceiling protects him from self-destruction. Machiavelli believed that ambition without boundaries turns a leader into a gambler. It convinces him that every risk is worth taking, and every opportunity must be seized. He becomes reckless, chasing victories that provide applause instead of stability. Once ambition turns into addiction, the ruler is no longer commanding his kingdom. He is chasing sensations that weaken his grip on reality. Machiavelli understood that those who fail to define their stopping point will eventually drive their own downfall with their own hands. Modern life reflects this same danger. People celebrate endless hustle, endless goals, endless expansion. They chase more money, more attention, more success, more recognition, without ever deciding what enough truly means. They burn out. They sabotage relationships. They compromise values. They lose themselves in the pursuit of a finish line that keeps moving. Machiavelli would warn that ambition without a ceiling becomes a trap. The world will keep feeding you reasons to want more, and if you never set boundaries, you will wake up one day surrounded by achievements that cost you your peace, your clarity, and your freedom. The wisest individuals know where ambition serves them and where ambition begins to consume them. They know when to climb and when to fortify. They know that a ceiling does not block their greatness but focuses it. Ambition becomes stronger when it is contained, not when it is scattered across endless desires. Machiavelli saw that the ruler who rises too fast often loses the most, while the ruler who defines his limits becomes a force that lasts through storms, betrayals, crises, and time itself. Ah, freedom! The word alone ignites a fire in the hearts of men, for every soul hungers to be unshackled, to stride unbound across the landscapes of ambition and desire. Yet many have mistaken the glitter of excess for liberty itself. And so we arrive at the paradox that has tormented rulers and rebels alike. True freedom is not in the limitless acquisition of wealth, power, or pleasure. It is in the discernment of enough. But what, you ask, is enough? And how does one know when the pursuit of more has begun to cage the very soul it once promised to liberate? Imagine a prince, seated upon a throne, wealth spilling from every vault, allies at every hand, armies loyal to his command. To the world, he is the epitome of freedom, untouchable and unbound. Yet, in the quiet of the night, he cannot sleep, haunted by the fear that his power is insufficient, that rivals, unseen and cunning, may rise to claim what he has built. The chains of greed are subtle, invisible, yet absolute. Here lies the first revelation. Freedom is not measured by accumulation, but by mastery over one's own desires. He who is a slave to his ambitions, no matter how vast, is less free than the pauper who has learned to walk unshaken among scarcity. Consider the merchants, who rise before dawn to tally coins and chart the ebb and flow of commerce. Their wealth multiplies, their estates expand, yet the hand that grasps tightens only to find that it holds less satisfaction with each passing day. This is no accident, but the natural law of desire. To covet beyond necessity is to sow the seeds of your own confinement. And yet, the world whispers constantly that more is better, that security is found in surplus, that freedom is purchased in quantities. Here, Machiavelli's voice would echo through the chambers of conscience. One must always ask not how much can I acquire, but how much must I acquire to remain unbound? In truth, the measure of enough is not external, it is internal. The sage ruler or the discerning individual understands that the mind, untamed by fear or desire, is the only true domain of liberty. Accumulating power without wisdom invites chaos, and amassing wealth without restraint invites slavery. The paradox unfolds. To gain true freedom, one must willingly limit one's own reach. To step back from the precipice of insatiable hunger is to rise above the very chains one might have thought invisible. Yet society mocks moderation. They call it mediocrity, cowardice, or complacency. The masses cheer for excess and fear restraint. And so, the seeker of freedom must cultivate a mind both sharp and detached, learning to move with ambition, yet stop when the line between mastery and bondage is approached. Freedom is not in the pursuit of infinite dominion, it is in the knowledge of when dominion becomes dominion over the self. This is the cunning of life. To navigate the treacherous waters of desire, to wield power like a blade without allowing it to pierce your own heart. Observe the statesman who, having amassed influence and secured his legacy, chooses not to expand further into unknown territories, not because he fears failure, but because he understands that the cost of excess may outweigh the benefit. His freedom is in restraint. His liberty is in the deliberate choice to define his boundaries, to claim sovereignty over his own spirit. He has grasped what few ever do. Enough is not measured by what one possesses, but by the absence of chains that possessions might bring. And here, dear listener, lies the ultimate revelation of Machiavelli's formula for true freedom. The truest power is not to acquire endlessly, but to know when to rest, when to say this suffices. For in the recognition of enough, the soul becomes impervious to fear, desire, and the relentless tyranny of comparison. The chains of society, of envy, of ambition, dissolve not in rebellion, but in wisdom. Freedom, then, is not granted. It is claimed internally in the battlefield of the self. And so, the path to true freedom is neither in endless accumulation nor in blind ambition. It is a battlefield waged within the mind, a conquest over one's own desires, fears, and impulses. He who understands when enough has been claimed, and when to step back from the ceaseless pursuit of more, holds a power far greater than armies, wealth, or influence could ever grant. Freedom, in its truest form, is not the absence of constraints but mastery over them, the wisdom to know which chains to break and which to leave untouched. Remember this: the world will always whisper that more is better, that happiness lies just beyond the next conquest, the next acquisition. But those who have learned the art of enough move unshaken through life. They are the true sovereigns, the rulers of their own fate, impervious to fear, envy, or the endless hunger of society. In their restraint lies their strength, and in their discernment, their liberty. So ask yourself, as Machiavelli would, how much is enough for you? How much do you truly need to walk unbound, to live without invisible chains, to claim the freedom that most men spend their lives chasing but never find? The answer is your greatest power, and the key to a life unshackled.